James Ernest of the Grueling Truth Radio Network here with Susan Jacoby. Susan, the author of Why Baseball Matters. So, what is it about baseball that you love it?
I've loved it my whole life. I say in the opening to the book that next to reading and making love, there's nothing that's given me more pleasure over a lifetime than baseball. I grew up in Chicago. My grandfather owned a bar in a suburb on the south side of Chicago, and television was very new to baseball then in the late 1950s, early 1950s too, and he wisely invested in the first color television set in the neighborhood. And I spent a lot of time on the weekends watching afternoon games and listening to all the old guys in the bar, and that's how I learned the game. And I just loved it. It's always seemed to me to be the thinking person's game. That's why it takes a long time to learn baseball, to learn what's going on when it looks like nothing's going on. And that's one of its problems, of course.
Exactly. It's the details, the intricacies of it that really change it from just a basic game to something way more advanced. I know what you mean.
Yeah, well, see, I mean, the thing is, look, in this digital culture we have, where we can summon up an image, action, at literally one click. Well, you glance at a basketball game, and if you're looking at it for 10 seconds, you're going to see a ball go through the hoop. I mean, that's what happens every 10 seconds in basketball, unless it's a really unusual defensive game. But you can. People who find baseball boring because they don't understand it, you can look at a baseball game for a long time, and you'll see if it's a low-scoring, well-pitched game, it will look, if you don't know about things like pitch setup, how you set up a hitter to swing at a pitch or not to swing at a pitch, it can look like nothing's happening because there's no scoring going on.
Exactly. It's one of those things that, people just don't understand that there is way more to the game than just the basics.
Well, I think, look, this is not, my childhood was different from Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House on the Prairie, and childhood today is just as much different from what my childhood was like as mine was from the 1880s. And one of the things about being young today is you're used to, from day one, getting stimulation and action very quickly. And baseball is not that kind of a game. And one of the things that baseball fills in when it seems like there's nothing happening is you sit around and talk to people. That's what I did when I was a kid in my granddad's bar. That's what I'll do today if I happen to be alone. I'll call somebody up, a fellow New York Mets fan, because that's where I am. And I could never be a Yankee fan. That's just I'll call somebody up and we'll talk about what we're looking at. That kind of thing. And so conversation, which is also an art, which is kind of at odds with the digital world. Conversation takes up what seem to be those really long spaces in the game when nothing's happening, and the time between innings, for that matter.
Exactly. That's why baseball games on the radio were still great, where some of the other sports, in my opinion, don't transition as well into radio, where they're more TV-based.
Well, baseball, look, I probably heard my first baseball games on the radio, professional baseball games. But the 1950s, look, they were a different time. First of all, you didn't just look at games or listen to them on the radio. You went down to the end of the block in the lot and you had pickup games. Until you were 13 or so, even if you were as a girl and as untalented a girl as I was and actually playing the game, you also learn about the game by playing it. It's that's important too. I think that baseball, I still enjoy listening to a baseball game on the radio. And in fact, sometimes will in the middle of the night when the Mets are on the West Coast. If I wake up, I'll flip on the radio and I'll listen to the broadcast from the radio. But I do think also that look. And watching a game on television is different from listening to it on the radio, and obviously going to the park is different to it from them. And it's also true, not to sound like an old Grinch, the death of baseball has been predicted every time there was a new technology. It's amazing. We never realize it today. Baseball owners did not greet radio in the 1920s with a great deal of enthusiasm, because they thought it was going to take away attendance at the ballpark, which was, in fact, an incredibly stupid idea, because most working people couldn't go to the ballpark to afternoon games during the week anyway. What baseball did was it introduced a whole new set of fans who couldn't get to the ballpark. My grandmother, who died at the age of 99 in 1999, 1998, became a baseball fan in the 1920s because while she didn't have time raising little kids to go to the ballpark, she could hear it on the radio that they had at home. And again, when television came along, the owners were they said, oh, well, that's different than radio. When people can actually see the game on the television, they won't go to the ballpark either. And what all of these things did, of course, was that they actually enlarged the audience. So, I mean, I don't think, you can't say baseball is dying because of digital media, but digital media are very different in that they're designed to cut your attention span. That's what digital media does. It does it in every area of life. It wants you to get to the answer. It wants you to get to the heart of the chase very fast. And that in itself is different from baseball. Whereas television and radio were just really reproducing what you were hearing in the park, what you would see in the ballpark, but with commentary.
Do you feel that there's something that baseball needs to change to go with the new technologies, to go with the new generations?
Well, first of all, Major League Baseball is trying to change. It's not that they're the commissioner of baseball and the head of the Players Union, both of whom I interviewed for this book, and they have somewhat different views on this. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, is convinced that making games shorter, I mean, give or take a few minutes, baseball games now last 3 hours, is very important. And a lot of new rules changes have been introduced in the 2018 season, such as limiting the number of visits by managers, coaches, or other players to the mound to 6 and 9 innings. This actually another one went into effect last year. You don't have to throw 4 balls for an intentional walk anymore. They've actually given up a few seconds in commercial breaks in both local and national telecasts. Now, I interviewed a lot of teenagers for this book too. Teenagers who consider themselves fans, but they don't sitting around for 3 hours watching a game. It's just not in their way of life. And I asked them if all of these rules changes, my guess is, they succeed in cutting the time of the game by 10 minutes. Let's say the average game is 2 hours and 50 minutes at the end of this season. This is just hypothetical. Instead of 3 hours and 5 minutes. Those kids are no more interested in watching a game for 2 hours and 50 minutes even though they're fans, than they are, and they consider themselves fans, than they are in watching a game for 3 hours and 5 minutes. So I don't think, I think that the rules changes that Rob Manfred has basically Major League Baseball has instituted, and the Players Union is pretty much going along. But there's another one coming down the pike, probably next year, that I don't think the Players Union is going to go along with, and that is a pitch clock, which is limiting, for anybody who's listening to this who's not a fan, a pitch clock could limit the amount of time a pitcher has to deliver the ball. Now, a pitch clock, unlike some of these rules changes this year, fundamentally changes the nature of the game because the game is a confrontation between the hitter and the batter, both of whom are trying to deceive each other about their intentions. I mean, that's the nature of pitching, and changes in the time of the delivery are part of that deceptive game that pitchers play with batters the whole time. I think that would fundamentally change the nature of the game, and I doubt that the players' union will go along with it. What will happen, who knows? Tony Clark, the head of the players' union, talks about using digital media to actually educate kids about things like pitch selection, and that I actually think has some possibilities. But I don't think the idea of reducing the time of the game by any amount that could reasonably affect people's perceptions is going to work. And so, I mean, baseball is booming. It has $10 billion in revenues, in annual. That's $10 billion. That's a lot of money. But it does have a problem, which is it has the oldest fan base of any major sport. And I'm talking about NBA basketball, NFL football, which also has some aging problems too, by the way. It also has the smallest number of female fans, and it's whiter. The only way in which the baseball demographic looks like America is it does have more Hispanic fans of all ages. And this is because there are so many Hispanic stars now. So, I mean, when you're talking, but the age problem is no matter how much money you're taking in, if the proportion of your fan base is getting older and older, I mean, basically the typical baseball fan is a white guy over 55. But if I were a woman, I would be the typical fan base.
And like you were saying, with that fan base, unfortunately, there are limits to how you can grow those demographics. What should they do to get a wider variety of or more diversity in the sport?
Okay, there is one thing that Major League Baseball is doing that's smart. They have this program called Play Ball in a lot of areas. It's not like Little League or anything like that. It's just introducing kids, young kids, kids under 10 years old, boys and girls, to just playing games with balls and sticks. That, I think, is smart. And you know why? Again, because it responds to something that's really changed the nature of being a kid. The walking down to the end of the street with no supervision for a pickup game, that is largely gone from American childhood for a whole variety of reasons. Providing some supervision and inviting all kinds of kids to actually play is a great way to stimulate interest in the game because there's no bigger predictor of whether you become a fan when you're older than whether you played as a kid. If you play as a kid, you're gonna start playing softball, which is mostly what kids play before they had hard balls and bats. It's a good idea. Exactly, and they're expanding these programs. Whether it'll work or not, I don't know, but it's a good idea that addresses itself directly to something else. It's not just that the kids have their noses buried in their iPhones and their iPads all the time. It's that one thing hasn't changed. They're 24 hours a day. If you're sitting with your face buried in your iPhone in the afternoon, you're not out playing. In other words, providing kids with some incentive to play. They say play ball. It's not work ball. It's play ball. It's a game. And I think that is a good idea. I think that Tony Clark's idea of having some digital programs that say are designed to teach kids about pitch selection. All right, what if they're not going to sit there at night and watch a ball game for 3 hours, even if they have a parent who does? They may take a look at something like that on digital media. But I also have another idea, and this is where I think The owner of the Baltimore Orioles instituted a program this year. I don't know whether it's still in effect, but every Sunday, any kid under 12 accompanied by an adult paying gets in for free. That is a great idea, and every team in Major League Baseball ought to do it. That you have to cultivate family viewing in ballparks. A kid who's seen a game at a ballpark, contrary to what those stupid owners in the 1920s thought about radio, is going to be more likely to look at it on television. Every park in the major league, if you've got $10 billion in revenues, you can afford to let kids in free with their parents. And there's something else too. I say this at the end of the book. Baseball should be making a big pitch to moms. Women have huge influence over the discretionary spending of families, and that means the entertainment you get on the weekends. And I'll tell you why. It's not that fathers wouldn't be interested in this either. They would. You know, nobody ever heard when you and I were kids about the effect of concussions on young people. There are a lot of parents who are very worried right now about kids playing football, because we now know that concussions, if they occur at an early age, can have serious impacts. Baseball is a sport, I'd advertise it to parents, and especially mom, as the safe sport for your kid. Why? It's not that there's never a concussion in baseball. It's that it's not how it doesn't happen as a part of how the game is naturally played. A concussion is an accident in baseball. Somebody gets hit in the head with a pitch. Two outfielders collide. But they're rare. They're the result of a mistake. Whereas in football, they're part of the way the game is played. I think, in other words, I would sell like crazy to women the idea of baseball as a safe, great sport for your kids. Bring your kid out to the ball game for free if you pay for a ticket this Saturday.
Yeah, that one definitely makes a lot of sense for doing that. Being able to get the kids more involved, being able to get them, loving the game and appreciating it. And like you said, the play program where they're having them just play with, bats and balls as opposed to having to be overly organized and structured. I agree. Those changes would definitely help. Also, one of the other things I was wanting to know is a lot of times it seems baseball had boomed because of race or nationality issues. Do you feel that integrating the game, having young women be able to progress up into the higher levels of baseball, do you think that would change anything?
Well, look, I've got to say that I wish it weren't so. And I'm not saying that there's not someday there's going to be a woman. I mean, look at the interest in Renee Davis in the Little League World Series, the first girl to pitch in Little League World Series games a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. But if a woman, for example, makes it into Major League Baseball, she will be the exception. In other words, the quote, the integration of baseball by sex, any more than women's basketball is much more popular than it used to be. But there are physical reasons why there could, who knows, there could be a woman in the NBA someday, and there could be a woman pitching on a major league field or playing shortstop on a major league field. One thing about baseball is it still has more normal-sized people than any other sport does. But in general, and I don't care whether this is politically incorrect, a phrase I hate, in general, most women could not meet, well, most men can't meet the standards of Major League Baseball either. But it's just physically there are reasons why while this could happen, it would be a unique woman. It would be a rare woman. Whereas, for example, when baseball was desegregated, when Major League Baseball in the 20th century was desegregated, when Jackie Robinson came up, Well, there were all kinds of it. In fact, there was no difference in the way black men and white men played baseball, although racists had been saying there was for a long time. Oh, black men couldn't pitch. They weren't smart enough. Just like the idea that there can't be a black quarterback in football. But women is something else. There are physical differences between men and women. The kind of strength that is needed to be a pitcher is something which naturally fewer women are going to have. So in other words, no, I don't think that baseball can be, quote, integrated between women and men in the way that it was. And right now, baseball has a problem. It doesn't, again, they're trying to address this. They've got urban academies now in America. Baseball does not have as many African American players on the field today as a percentage of the total as it did 30 years ago. And there's a reason for that, too. It's the reason the Hispanic fan base has grown. A lot of the newer stars of the game are Hispanic, and there are some signs that these urban academies, there are drafts into the minor leagues now, first-round drafts that are coming from these urban academies. And the reason is, look, every major league club has an academy in the Dominican Republic. Why do they have academies in the Dominican Republic? Well, of course, the enthusiasm for baseball there is great. It is a lot cheaper to run an academy in the Dominican Republic than an academy in Los Angeles. The Dominican Republic is a very poor country. There is a profit motive. In other words, it is cheaper to develop players in a poor Latin American country than it is to develop players who can't afford to finance it themselves in this country. One of the things that a lot of people who live in cities, where I live in New York, I didn't fully realize till I started working on this book how much sort of semi-professionalization has gone on among sports at the high school level. There are kids, like Rob Manfred says, baseball for kids under 12 is still the most played sport. But after 12, kids start to specialize only in the sports that they're really good at. Baseball is not, having your little league team anymore sponsored by your local hardware store and your high school phys ed teacher is the coach. It's traveling elite leagues that parents spend several $1,000s a year on to have their kids participate in. Now, can parents, black or white, if they have only average incomes, afford to spend that kind of money? No. So that you have, one of the reasons there have been fewer black American players, and my guess would be also fewer players from places like West Virginia, where family income, one of the poorer states in the Union, is that parents cannot afford this kind of thing. And even if they could, you could make a good case that it'd be stupid to do it. Look, only 10% of people who get to the minor leagues ever play a day of Major League Baseball. If you're the best in your high school class, your chances of getting into the minor leagues are not very good. And yes, and if you need a college scholarship, well, are your parents going to be able to spend thousands of dollars on these elite youth programs? No, that's why I think the play ball program is good, because it opens up some opportunities for people who can't afford this. I mean, there is a reason why the economic income inequality in this country, the gap between the richest people and the poorest people, well, obviously it affects the ability of parents to pay for their kids in elite sports. If you had a high school age kid, would you spend $3,000 a year on traveling youth leagues for him?
No way.
Well, I wouldn't either. No way, because you know about sports. You know how unlikely it is that this is ever going to turn into either a scholarship, much less a professional career.
Exactly, the return on investment isn't worth it. I mean, in the rare circumstance, that if my kid was great and he was really into it, and that kind of thing. But for the most part, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, just what parents end up doing with some of the sports nowadays, it is remarkably unbelievable. So do you,
Yeah, well, and it's also ridiculous. I'm thinking, I'm 72. I am of the last generation. Tom Seaver is 6 months older than I am. I think I am of the last generation who could have expected to see, these benchmarks of the game that used to exist. The 300 game winner over a 20-year career. The perfect game. The complete game. These things aren't happening. All you have to do, in other words, the milestones of the game are very different now. And I think it's ridiculous, for kids, who are teenagers to be encouraged only to play sports that they're the greatest at. There's a lot of fun to be derived from appreciating a sport, even if you're not the greatest. I mean, one of the reasons I was especially thrilled at the start of baseball season this year, well, we all know that whenever we turn on the news, that is the news of the real world, it's unpleasant. Whatever we hear is stressful. Listening to the news, watching the news, it just makes you feel like you'll never get to sleep at night. Well, sports broadcasts, they only talk about what's in front of you on the field. I called up a friend and I said, do you realize any night we're home and watching the ball game, we are not going to hear one bit of bad news that hasn't anything to do, unless it has to do with our team's performance on the field for 3 hours. As far as I'm concerned, they can make baseball games even longer. It prevents me from listening to the rest of the news.
exactly, because you're right, there is such bad news out there.
And I'll bet there are a lot of people of all political persuasions who feel that way. I mean, there's just a lot to be derived from sports, even though they're not separate from life either. That doesn't have to do with whether you're ever going to be a Major League Baseball player.
Do you feel that the expansion into betting with the fantasy sports will be able to help reimmerse people into baseball?
No. I think, first of all, I did interview a lot of kids who play fantasy sports. They're not supposed to, but of course they do. One of the reasons they like it is it doesn't take as much time as watching a real ball game. You get to pick your team, and there's a competitive reward, even if it's not money. And there are two kinds of fantasy baseball players. One are, and they're mostly men. There's some women, but overwhelmingly they're young men. They join together as it's kind of like the fantasy sports are sometimes called the book clubs for men, and the guys I interviewed didn't deny that. It's a way for men to sort of get together online, have fun. It doesn't take 3 hours, and sort of pit their wits against each other. It's not about gambling, and these kind of guys, their stakes are ridiculously low. What's at stake might be $5 a week. In other words, they're not doing it for gambling. But then there are all the commercial fantasy sports things you can see online, like Fan Kings, all of which all of the major sports, including MLB, are invested in. All I can say is this. Those kind of things, they encourage a lot of the people involved in them are doing it to gamble. They're doing it to gamble in a way that's not going to the off-track betting parlor. They're not the kind of guys who just get together to have fun and pit their wits against each other. They are gamblers. And you tell me about the history of baseball. And it's not just baseball, I would say that, when has baseball ever been involved with gambling when it ended well?
Yeah. Huh? Yeah, I was going to say, I'm here in Cincinnati, so no, it hasn't.
I mean, there you go. And I don't think, since fantasy baseball is different, it's about, actually, as one young man who's not a gambler explained to me, it's about control. It's kind of, he was saying the fans' fantasy used to be the manager and how much better you do at it. Now it's to be the general manager. Fantasy baseball allows you to do the one thing as a fan in the ballpark or watching your team on TV or listening on radio you can never do. Fantasy baseball allows you to control things. It gives you you can pick the guys you want. The guys you can't pick because you're not the general manager of the New York Mets or the Cincinnati Reds. You're just you, a fan. So it gives an illusion of control, but that's very different. I mean, one of the things about real baseball is it's so painful is you can't control it. You wish you could, but you can't at all. You know, those guys are out there doing what they're doing, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. I do not think that fantasy baseball is going to produce the next generation of real baseball fans, and it's not because you can't, in a fantasy baseball game, you can't, say, fix the outcome in the way that, say, a bunch of corrupt players can fix the outcome. It's not so much about that. It's just that fantasy baseball really is kind of the opposite of real baseball. It really does allow people to have the illusion of control. And the gambling part of it, it's just, they're doing it to gamble. They're just gambling on baseball. But, you know, that's all. It could be gambling. It could be gambling on anything.
Very true. Yeah, I was going to say that is the thing people are into nowadays. They want to be the GM. They're wanting to be in control. They're wanting to, have their say in the sports. And it is interesting to see how that has shifted from, like you said, where growing up people wanted to be more the strategy aspect of it with the coach, and now they're more into the behind the scenes kind of thing.
Yeah, well, one of the things we don't know about behind the scenes, there's a long study MLB is doing. We won't have the results of it for a couple of years, but when I was talking about, these elite youth leagues and so on, we don't know, but kids are throwing hard at younger ages. I mean, the Mets have a starting lineup built around great young pitching. The problem is of the young pitchers, every one of them has had Tommy John surgery before the age of 24. Now, Tommy John was 30 when he had Tommy John surgery. So, I mean, the question of what this hard-throwing, competitive style of teenage baseball does to bodies that haven't been, they're not growing. Men in particular grow a lot between the ages of 18 and 22. What does it mean to be injured or to have Tommy John surgery at 21 compared to having it at 30? I mean, those are answers. I think that baseball needs and that they really don't have. When they continue to talk about, they're talking now, and the Mets have had a very good start. They're talking about the pitching and if they stay healthy and all of that. Well, they were all every one of them but one was on the disabled last year. Why are they thinking when they're a year older it's necessarily going to be any different this year? I mean, I think there's a lot of unwillingness to face the injury implications for the way ball is being played by younger and younger people.
Exactly. Like you said, they're throwing harder, so that's putting more stress, or they're throwing the more variety of pitches where, once again, puts stress on the different angles, where they need to just focus more on the basics, like they did in the past, and then progressively, as their bodies change, then start advancing the pitch styles. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, adjust to it. Look, I mean, 2 years ago, the Mets had a person who was a fan favorite, Bartolo Colon. He was then 40. He won 15 games for the Mets, more than any of the young hotshot pitchers, and he almost never threw a fastball over 90 miles an hour. He drove the hitters crazy because he was something he did with his fingers at the last minute in pressing the ball made it move at the last minute. And so, it looked like, he'd be throwing this ball, the radar gun would measure 88 miles an hour, and the hitters were totally baffled.
Exactly. It's always good to have that crafty veteran, the Charlie Huff, the different ones over the years that have been able to maintain their ability in the game.
In fact, I was riding the subway that summer, and there was a guy who was opening up. He looked like he was in his 20s. He was opening up Major League's At Bat app, and he was kind of looking at the results. A game with Bartolo Colon was starting, and oh no, he was looking back on it. It was over. And I asked him if he watched the whole game the night before, and he said no. He said, why not? He said, well, the final score was 3-2, and there wasn't any scoring in the first 6 innings, and he got bored. So, that in a way I thought, that guy is interested in baseball, or he wouldn't have the At-Bat app, which is mostly opened by people under 30. But he's a different kind of fan, and maybe somebody like me will have to accept that. But something is lost in it. Obviously, baseball has to keep up with this digital stuff. But one thing I'm sure of is it's going to be a different kind of fan.
Exactly. Yeah, that is the big thing, is how being a fan, defining it, has definitely changed over the years, and will always seem to change and evolve. If fans are wanting to follow you on social media, where's the best spot to follow you at?
SusanJacoby.com, my website. I am not on Facebook or Twitter. I know. But I have lots of things on my website. Moreover, people can email me at that website and ask me a question. There's a contact thing, and I answer every one of my emails.
That is awesome. I was going to say, I'm sure the fans will have questions about either the intricacies of baseball or.
Well, I would love. And I have been getting, since this book was published, I've been getting a lot of baseball questions on my website, actually, and I answer them. I go through my email every week. I discard the spam, but the difference between that and Facebook is that it's that I don't have to deal with followers who say, what sort of an idiot are you? You're just a girl. You don't know anything about baseball. That kind of thing. I don't want it. I write books about a lot of subjects. I write American history is basically my subject, which is, it's not like baseball's not related to American history.
Oh, very true.
And I just don't want to spend my life on Facebook.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I was going to say, you can kind of baseball so parallels the history of our country and just how it's changed and developed over the years. That, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it only makes sense to have one of our leading historical authors write a baseball book.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, historians are very interested in baseball. When baseball really became, it started in the Northeast. It really became a national sport during the Civil War. And why? As in so many cases, war has been a driver for medical advances. What happened is northern prisoners in southern prisoner of war camps and southern prisoners in northern prisoner of war camps, they learned baseball. And the northern prisoners, at least in the early part of the war, before things really got nasty, northern prisoners would bring baseball, and they would teach it to their guards and all of that. And baseball, after the Civil War is over, baseball really becomes a national sport.
Thanks to Abner Doubleday.
No, that's a myth.
Yeah.
Abner Doubleday did not start baseball.
Yeah, that is one of those crazy ones that baffle that.
Although Doubleday Field in Cooperstown is a very attractive baseball field, but
that's a nice field. But yeah, I agree with you. It's just one of those things.
And the other one is Abner Doubleday, who actually, he was a general, and he actually was at Lincoln's bedside when he was dying, and it was said that the Lincoln's last words were, "Don't let baseball die," which is also not true. But one of the interesting things about the development of baseball, we all think of Jackie Robinson as the first black baseball player. But that's true in the modern major leagues. But there were a couple of black baseball players in the 19th century in what were then considered the major leagues, in a team which eventually evolved into the Chicago Cubs, actually. And they they played, on predominantly white baseball teams. This is before the end of Reconstruction. With the end of Reconstruction and the imposition of Jim Crow throughout the South, that was the end of those black baseball players. And there are people in the Hall of Fame like Cap Anson, who's one of the most famous players in baseball history, who were just who were really famous in their time for their racism. They ought to be adding a few lines to his statue in the Hall of Fame. And of course, it's all different now. They're going to be more Hispanic players in the Hall of Fame. Ichiro Suzuki is certainly going to be the first player born in Asia who will be admitted to the Hall of Fame.
Very true. There's a lot of changes going on in baseball, and it seems like the majority of them are for the better. If fans are wanting to get a copy of that new book, what bookstores do you recommend?
Well, of course you can get it on Amazon, and most independent bookstores have it. But that's the choice. Basically, that's the choice. Your local, every town has an independent bookstore that's beloved by book lovers. They all have my baseball book, and of course, it's on all of the usual websites that sell books.
Excellent. Any final thoughts from you about baseball in 2018?
Baseball in 2018. I think. Maybe a better question. Baseball in 2018 is going to be, it's going to be good. The rivalries, it's too early in the season to tell yet. Any more than I think that the Mets are necessarily going to get themselves into the World Series because they've had a great start. So too, we don't know whether teams that are now in a funk are going to come out of them or not. It's really when you're talking about April, you're talking about too soon to tell. In general, I think that I don't think these rules changes are really going to have any effect at all. Baseball, and at the end of the day, it's going to be pretty much 3-hour baseball game. One thing that's interesting is the impact of. You can't tell what will your postseason be like. I mean, the 2016 World Series between the Cubs and the Indians was one of the most watched in baseball history. And the seventh game between the Indians and the Cubs, won by the Cubs, was the most watched sporting event last year. And it not only brought in viewers, it brought in a high percentage of younger viewers, people under 25, teenagers, kids. The impact of a big World Series isn't to be overestimated. So a lot about how baseball, the 2017 World Series, which was not a bad World Series at all, between the Dodgers and the Astros, but it didn't have the pop of the 2016 World Series. So a lot also depends on the rivalries and how they evolve and how sharp they are and how good they are. And that's the one way in which baseball hasn't changed. And that even as it did when in the Cubs-Indians series, that transcends the digital media unwillingness to pay attention. Because what happens in a great postseason is the tension builds and builds and builds. And it pulls in people who aren't necessarily fans of that team. I mean, it was no. How many people normally watch the Cleveland Indians in, say, Kentucky during the regular season? But you can be sure that plenty of people in Kentucky watch those World Series games.
Exactly. They were quite captivating, quite riveting, and just seeing those franchises that had struggled for so many years with the Cubs and the Indians trying to finally overcome those demons of the past.
See, that's why I think baseball can't forget its unique selling proposition. The fact that the quality of the play on the field can affect viewership of the game so much. And those games were long, too. I mean, sometimes I was so bleary-eyed the next morning I could hardly get to work. But the quality of the play, which does have to do with the unfolding as the big book of the season unfolds and as as long games unfold. While it's one of the things that a lot of young people don't like, it's also one of the things that baseball has to offer. And somehow I have this feeling that you can't ever sell anything if you get, if you don't remember what sold it in the first place. So I think, I understand completely, Rob Manfred's views, but I think there needs to be some balance. And the thing that baseball has to offer is just these enormous changes that can occur just when you think nothing else is going to happen.
Exactly. Well, I'd like to thank our guest today, Susan Jacoby, author of Why Baseball Matters. And definitely, as you continue with baseball in the future, we'd love to have you back on the show.
Well, I love this show. This is great. I'm loving talking to sports people all over the country, people just as crazy as I am.
Exactly. It's been our pleasure having you on today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome.